Welcome to the deep dive. We take these really big, complex global ideas and, well, try to make them essential, memorable insights for you. Today, we're wrestling with a question that kind of defines geopolitics. How does a nation actually guarantee its own existence? And look, we're not just talking diplomacy or, economic stability right now. We mean the physical, the strategic reality of being a fortress nation. These are countries that have so fundamentally wired their policy, their culture, their infrastructure around defense that they've reached this state of being, well, almost impenetrable. So, our mission today, dive deep into the source material. We've got outlines here for five really distinct models of national survival. We're going to explore how geography, technology, and just sheer cultural commitment kind of fuse together to build these modern fortresses.
Right, and framing this analysis is, well, it's crucial because, as you said, we're looking at a whole spectrum of defense choices here. You've got deterrence by denial at one end. That's the idea. You can stop pretty much every threat before it even hits you. It needs massive tech investment, layers upon layers of defense. Then, flip side, you deterrence by punishment. Here, you kind of accept you might get hit first, but you absolutely guarantee the attacker pays an unbearable price, a catastrophic cost. Understanding the why behind a nation's choice. Is it money? Is it, desperation? Unique geography? That's the key to figuring out how they actually manage to survive.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that. So we'll start with a model where it feels like every single policy decision flows from the memory of war and this constant perceived threat of just annihilation. Let's start with Israel. Survival through total spectrum defense. Israel's core strategic belief, really since its founding back in 1948, is that one single failure, just one slip up in a major conflict, could genuinely mean the end of the state. Because that margin for error is basically zero, they've prioritized this defense matrix that's layered, it's fast, and it's constantly evolving. Their strategy, it's really a masterclass in that deterrence by denial you mentioned.
Absolutely. That layered defense system is pretty much unparalleled globally,
Right.
especially how integrated it is against all these different kinds of threats, short, medium, long-range, asymmetric stuff. It's basically several overlapping shields, right? And each one is optimized for a different kind of incoming projectile. So at the lowest level, you've got the one everyone's heard of, Iron Dome. This system is specifically built for those short-range rockets and mortars. The kind of thing that gives an aggressor deniability but creates just massive terror for civilians. During the 2014 Gaza conflict, it showed an operational success rate hitting almost 90% against the targets it engaged.
90%, wow.
Yeah, and the sheer volume of incoming stuff it can handle at the same time, that's what makes it really stand out.
And crucially, they didn't just stop there, did they? As the threats got bigger, longer range, more sophisticated, they built the middle layer, David's Sling.
Exactly. David's Sling fills that gap. It's designed for medium-range ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, heavier rockets, and make sure that if Iron Dome gets overwhelmed or the projectile's just faster or coming from further away, there's that second safety net.
Okay, so layer upon layer.
Precisely. And then way up high, highest altitude, you get the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 systems. These are the nation's strategic shields. They're designed for the really big threats, long-range missiles, even ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. What makes Arrow 3 so groundbreaking is its exoatmospheric capability.
Exoatmospheric, meaning outside the atmosphere?
Exactly. It can hit a warhead while it's still way up in space before it even starts to re-enter. That dramatically increases the area it can protect and, limits any risk from fallout down below.
We actually saw this whole system in action pretty spectacularly, didn't we? April 2024, that massed attack, drones, missiles.
Yeah, that was a major test. And the Arrow systems, working with all the other defenses, they achieved something like a 99% interception rate.
99%. That's incredible.
It really is. And that data point is not just a number, right? It represents a truly functional fortress that can defeat these massive volume attacks using layered technology. It works.
And this need for constant real-world testing, it feeds directly into something else, doesn't it? What you might call the fortress's sort of self-funding mechanism. Israel has become one of the world's top arms exporters. We're talking about huge domestic defense companies, Rafale advanced defense systems, Elbit systems. They're constantly pushing the boundaries on advanced tech.
That's a really key point.
They're not just selling missile defense, they're innovators in things like advanced sensors, digitized battle management systems, drones, and especially these things called loitering munitions.
Yes, the suicide drones, as some call them.
Right. For the listener, basically, Small, smart drones. They can hunt, they can hover over a target area, wait for the right moment, and then attack. For a nation needing surgical precision in really dense, complex environments, this tech is vital. And the money they make exporting it, it dramatically subsidizes their whole defense budget. So the Fortress is also this global tech powerhouse.
But, the fortress isn't just tech. It's equally defined by its people, its human capital, and how deeply defense is integrated into society. Technology only works if you have the people, right? People to operate it, maintain it, deploy it super fast. And that starts with compulsory service.
The draft, basically.
Yeah. 36 months for men, 24 months for women, kicking in right at age 18, nearly universal.
Yeah.
But what's really fascinating, I think, is how the reservist duty structure extends this commitment deep into the fabric of daily life. People keep training, they're subject to immediate call-up, well into their middle age. This structure lets the nation achieve this staggering, immediate surge capacity.
Surge capacity, meaning they can scale up incredibly quickly.
Incredibly quickly, mobilizing potentially millions of trained fighters within, say, 48 to 72 hours. This isn't just having a military, it's having a populace that is permanently kept at a high state of readiness, trained.
And that awareness, that readiness, it permeates everything, even the architecture of civil life. War readiness isn't some abstract idea. It's literally mandated by law. We're talking about stringent building codes requiring new homes to have safe rooms, schools designed to double as fortified bunkers.
Even commercial airliners fitted with anti-missile systems.
Right. The civilian infrastructure itself is part of that defensive layering.
And then finally, we have to at least mention the ultimate unconfirmed layer, that widespread belief in Israel's nuclear deterrent. The bomb in the basement, as it's often called.
Officially unacknowledged, of course.
Completely. But the consensus estimates, they suggest anywhere from 90 to maybe 400 warheads. Just the assumption that they have a guaranteed second strike capability. It fundamentally changes the calculation for any state thinking about a full-scale invasion.
So, connecting the dots here. The Israeli model is that deterrence by denial, stopping the attack, heavily backed up by the ultimate deterrence by punishment, the nuclear option. It's a fortress built on speed, precision, layers of tech, and the complete mandatory integration of society into that defense mechanism. Okay, that's a blueprint built on hypermodernity, on tech, on speed. Now let's pivot. Let's turn to a model that relies on almost the opposite philosophy, not stopping the missiles necessarily, but guaranteeing absolute catastrophic damage in return. Let's pivot to North Korea. Deterrence by suffering.
North Korea's strategy is, well, it's a grimly effective adaptation given their limited resources. They absolutely know, they cannot win a prolonged conventional war against modern coalitions like the U.S. and South Korea.
Right, technologically, they're way behind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So their goal is simply to make any attempt at regime change, any invasion, unimaginably costly. Their entire survival rests on maximizing the suffering they can inflict back on the attacker, especially, and this is key, especially on South Korea.
And they use their landscape for this, right? Their first line of defense is just the geography, the mountains.
Absolutely. Sources indicate they spent decades literally hollowing out vast mountain ranges, creating deep, hardied infrastructure. Huge bunkers, kilometers and kilometers of tunnels, protected positions for their artillery.
So digging in deep.
Deep.
Yeah.
And this serves two purposes. First, obviously protect your high-value stuff, command centers, weapon systems from airstrikes. Second, and this is maybe more ominous, it allows them to keep operating, potentially for a long time, deep underground, weathering even extensive bombing campaigns. It gives them operational resilience against superior air power.
And the immediate terrifying centerpiece of this whole strategy, it's that massive amount of artillery aimed right at Seoul, the South Korean capital.
Yeah, that's the headline threat, isn't it?
We're talking a city of nearly 10 million people, and North Korea has deployed something like 6,000 artillery pieces just north of the DMZ, the demilitarized zone.
6,000.
And these aren't precision weapons, are they? They're massed conventional systems, mostly rockets, big guns that can just start bombarding Seoul within minutes of a conflict starting. The sheer guaranteed destruction of civilian life, of infrastructure, that's their ultimate psychological and strategic lever.
And when you look at manpower, North Korea completely flips the Israeli model, the high-tech, smaller force idea.
Yeah.
They prioritize sheer numbers, mass. They maintain a staggering 1.3 million active personnel. That's one of the largest standing armies on the planet.
Huge.
And it's backed up by millions more in reserves and various paramilitary units. The conscription commitment is just immense, often lasting between 3 and incredibly runs up to 12 years.
12 years.
It
Wow.
creates this enormous force. Now, okay, it's often poorly equipped, maybe not the best trained by Western standards, but it's dedicated. And the sheer mass, especially if you're talking urban warfare or fighting in those tunnels,
Yeah.
it would mean an agonizingly slow, incredibly costly advance for any invading force.
Their weapons stockpile seems to reflect this duality too, right? Quantity for the conventional fight, but maybe more quality for the strategic deterrence.
That's a good way to put it. On the conventional side, yeah, they've got something like 3,500 tanks, mostly older models, hundreds of jets, again, mostly outdated. Individually, maybe not that impressive. But used en masse, they create this huge, grinding, conventional force that just soaks up time, resources, and, frankly, lives.
But the real credibility, the thing that makes the world pay attention, that rests on their nuclear arsenal, which is advancing really rapidly.
Definitely. They have successfully developed and tested ICBM's intercontinental ballistic missiles, things capable of reaching the continental United States.
That's a game changer.
Huge game changer. And they've also invested heavily in developing a nuclear-armed submarine capability
A sub capability, why is that so significant?
because it gives them a potential second strike capability that's much harder to track and neutralize than land-based missiles. A sub at sea is notoriously difficult to find. It means they're no longer just holding Seoul hostage. They're fundamentally changing the global calculus. It forces the U.S., for instance, to weigh the cost of intervention, not just in terms of a regional war, but potentially a nuclear exchange hitting its own soil.
And so every missile test they do, it's less about the tech itself and more about sending a message.
Right.
A very loud, unambiguous message.
Exactly. It reinforces their nuclear doctrine.
Yeah.
Any attempt to mess with the regime, to try and change it, will trigger massive retaliation, potentially non-conventional. They leverage that capacity for destruction as really their only guarantee of security.
There's a fascinating but grim trade-off here, though. This model, built en masse on guaranteed destruction, it comes at a staggering cost to their own society.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The sources estimate North Korea spends up to maybe even more than 25% of its entire GDP on defense.
A quarter of everything they produce.
Think about that. And that figure is directly, tragically correlated with the intense civilian impoverishment you see there. Their fortress is literally built by denying their own population basic necessities. It's a stark example of a model where national survival completely overrides every other societal consideration.
It really is an absolute contrast. You've got Israel relying on layers and speed to make invasion just too costly in military terms. Then North Korea relies on sheer, guaranteed destruction to make the political cost, the human cost, just unbearable.
Okay, let's pivot again entirely. We've looked at defense through high-tech conflict, defense through guaranteed devastation. Now let's examine a nation that's managed to engineer its peace, its neutrality, through this incredible commitment to isolation and preparation for total siege. Let's talk about Switzerland.
Switzerland's core strategy is really unique, isn't it? Neutrality, yes, but neutrality maintained not through weakness or passivity, but through ironclad preparation. They've spent centuries blending their rugged alpine geography, their formidable infrastructure, and this tradition of armed citizenship to create the ultimate alpine fortress. And the historical foundation for this is the National Redoubt. This was conceived even before, but heavily used during the Cold War, right? This elaborate system, fortifications, bunkers,
And strategically placed demolition charges on virtually every major bridge, road, tunnel leading into the country.
So the idea was, if a massive army, say, the Soviets back then, tried to invade.
The Swiss military wouldn't try to hold the border. They'd retreat high up into the Alps, into the redoubt, and they'd blow all the entry points behind them, bridges, tunnels, roads, gone.
Locking the door behind them.
Exactly. Forcing the enemy into this slow, agonizing siege, fighting through mountains, through tunnels, bleeding the invader dry, making it so costly and time-consuming that eventually they'd just give up.
And that level of preparation wasn't just military. It was institutionalized throughout the whole society. That 1963 civil defense law sounds monumental.
It really was. It
Yeah.
mandated that every single resident in Switzerland must have access to shelter space. This wasn't a guideline. It was an architectural and civil requirement baked into the system.
And the legacy of that is still there today.
Absolutely incredible legacy. Today, Switzerland maintains over 9 million shelter spaces. That's more than enough for its entire population.
9 million. Where are they all?
Ingeniously hid in plain sight. Often, They double as municipal parking garages or basements in apartment buildings and homes, even sections of subway tunnels,
Hmm.
all designed to be instantly convertible into NBC shelters, nuclear, biological, chemical proof.
Now, we do need to acknowledge things have shifted since the Cold War ended, right? Geopolitics changed in the 90s. The overt militarization, it's softened a bit.
Naturally, yeah. Troop numbers dropped drastically. They went from maybe 750,000 at the peak down to around 150,000 today.
And all those Cold War forts.
Many were repurposed, some became museums, which is interesting, and perhaps even more telling, quite a few were converted into these high-security, bomb-proof data centers.
Data centers, huh?
Yeah, which kind of proves the underlying structural integrity, the fortress aspect, still serves a modern purpose, even if it's protecting servers now instead of soldiers.
That does raise a critical point, though, and something for the listener to think about. If the original fortress was designed to stop Soviet tank divisions rolling in, how relevant is that kind of physical defense against modern threats, like asymmetric digital warfare or long-range cruise missiles that can just fly over the mountains?
That's the key challenge, absolutely. And the sources suggest that while, yes, the threat profile has changed dramatically, the core readiness hasn't entirely disappeared. They still maintain, for example, tunnel-based airfields that could potentially be brought back online relatively quickly, and that highly functional ready reserve system ensures the basic skill set is maintained across the population.
So the thinking shifted. Less about preventing long-term occupation, maybe more about surviving an intense short-term conflict.
Perhaps, and their deep bunker infrastructure, that guarantees a level of societal survival, even through a pretty intense exchange. They can ride it out.
And central to their whole model, historically and even today, is this concept of armed citizenship, the militia tradition.
Right. Swiss men complete their mandatory military service, and the tradition for a long time was that they kept their issued service rifles, sometimes even ammo, at home after their service.
Still the case.
It's evolved, become a bit more regulated, but the legacy is strong. Sources estimate that somewhere between 25% and maybe even 50% of Swiss households are armed. This translates into a highly decentralized, potentially instantly mobilizable, and deeply trained populace.
So if some conventional force somehow got past all those demolished bridges and tunnels and actually tried to occupy Swiss territory,
They wouldn't just be fighting professional soldiers in uniform. They'd face a ready, armed, locally knowledgeable resistance integrated across literally every valley and town. A nightmare for an occupier.
So connecting this back to the bigger picture, Switzerland proves that neutrality doesn't have to mean being passive or weak. Their model is a form of deterrence by denial, but it's based on infrastructure, geography, and societal commitment.
Exactly. They project this image that occupation is fundamentally impossible, not because it'll necessarily defeat you in a pitched battle, but because the resulting siege warfare, fighting in their mountain stronghold, it would just be a prolonged, exhausting logistical quagmire. Too much hassle, basically.
Okay, we've gone from hyper-tech layers in Israel to guaranteed devastation from North Korea to this engineered neutrality and siege readiness in Switzerland. Now let's shift gears again and look at sheer scale, the ultimate global power, a fortress that's less about fixed structures and more about massive, mobile, continent-sized projection of force. Let's talk about the United States.
The U.S. core strategy is, yeah, it's unlike any other we've discussed. It's defined by this unique combination, unmatched global military power plus incredible geographical isolation. That combination makes the U.S. probably the hardest nation on Earth to invade, not really because of specific border fortifications, but because of insurmountable distance and this overwhelming outward-focused force projection.
That geographical advantage really is the ultimate moat, isn't it? The Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean.
Yep.
These are just colossal logistical barriers.
Huge barriers. No conventional military force today could realistically cross either ocean in sufficient force and then sustain a major invasion of the U.S. mainland. It's just not feasible.
Plus, borders with Canada and Mexico, generally peaceful, stable neighbors.
Right. So the U.S. hasn't faced a really meaningful external invasion threat since, what, the War of 1812? Very long time ago.
So this unique position lets the U.S. focus less on defending fixed borders, like Israel or Korea might have to.
And more on projecting power globally, dealing with potential threats thousands of miles away, long before they could ever become a direct problem for the continental U.S. Power projection is their defense, in a way.
And the scale of that military dominance supporting this is, oh, it's almost hard to comprehend. The sources talk about a defense budget approaching $1 trillion a year.
$1 trillion.
Yeah.
Annually.
To put that in perspective for you, the listener, That budget is often estimated to be roughly equal to the defense spending of the next 9 or 10 largest military powers combined.
It's just a staggering level of expenditure. And it pretty much guarantees constant technological superiority across the board.
That budget supports, what, 1.3 million active troops, plus around 800,000 reserves, capable of operating everywhere.
Yeah, land, sea, air, space, cyber,
Yeah.
every domain. But the true shield, arguably, is naval supremacy. The U.S. maintains the world's most advanced navy. Central to that are the 11 nuclear-powered supercarriers.
11 of them. And those are key, right? Explain why for the listener.
Absolutely vital. Think of them as floating, mobile air bases. Each one can deploy a full fighter wing, dozens of advanced aircraft pretty much anywhere on the planet, often within days or even hours.
Global reach.
Total global reach. And alongside the carriers, they run a fleet of around 70 nuclear-powered attack submarines, very hard to detect, and over 70 advanced cruisers and destroyers. This lets them patrol basically every major global sea lane and ensures no significant hostile fleet could even approach U.S. coasts unchallenged.
And that naval shield, it's complemented by air power that's just as dominant.
Unparalleled air power, yeah.
Right.
Between the Air Force and the Navy, the U.S. operates over 5,000 military aircraft. We're talking advanced stuff like stealth bombers, the B-2, the B-21, and the fifth-generation fighters like the F-22 Raptor and the F-35 Lightning II.
These aren't just planes. They represent a guaranteed ability to achieve air dominance, air superiority, in pretty much any conflict zone anywhere. Again, eliminating threats far from U.S. shores.
And then underpinning all of this conventional might is the foundational deterrence, the nuclear triad.
Right. The ultimate guarantee.
This concept ensures that no matter what kind of surprise first strike an enemy might try, a devastating nuclear response is absolutely guaranteed. It makes a disarming first strike impossible.
And it's crucial to understand the three legs of that triad, right? For redundancy.
Exactly. Redundancy and survivability are key. First leg, land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, kept in hardened underground silos across the country. Second leg, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, SLBMs, carried by ballistic missile submarines, the boomers, which are virtually undetectable once they're out on patrol deep in the ocean. That's the ultimate insurance policy.
Can't hit what you can't find.
Pretty much. Third leg, strategic bombers like the B-52s, B-2s, capable of launching nuclear cruise missiles or dropping bombs from the air. This redundancy across air, sea, and land makes it fundamentally impossible for an enemy to take out America's entire nuclear retaliatory capability in one go.
Now, something that often gets overlooked, I think, when talking about U.S. defense is the civilian factor, what you might call an internal deterrent.
Ah, the rifle behind every blade of grass idea.
Exactly. The sources cite estimates of around 400 million privately owned firearms in the United States.
400 million. More guns than people.
Right. Now, obviously, this isn't a formal military doctrine like Switzerland's militia, but that cultural saturation of armed citizens, it represents this massive, unpredictable, and potentially overwhelming internal resistance factor for any hostile force that could somehow, miraculously, land on American soil and try to occupy territory. It adds another layer of complexity and cost.
So, summing up the U.S. model, it's really defined by scale, by distance, and by projection. It's deterrence by denial on a global scale. The goal isn't just to defend the homeland, but to maintain strategic dominance so complete that no serious invasion attempt is even conceivable in the first place.
Okay. We have one final, really fascinating model left, and it proves that size is entirely secondary to commitment, to specialization, and especially to speed. Let's dive into Singapore, the poisonous shrimp.
Singapore operates under this profoundly self-aware and I think incredibly effective doctrine, famously summed up by its founder, Lee Kuan Yew. In a world where big fish eat small fish, Singapore must be a poisonous shrimp.
Poisonous shrimp. I love that.
It perfectly captures their situation. They understand their vulnerability. They're a tiny island city-state, a global trading hub, completely dependent on open sea lanes. They know they cannot outlast or outfight a major superpower in a prolonged war, but they are utterly, absolutely committed to making invasion a short, sharp, catastrophic nightmare for anyone who tries.
And their level of commitment financially is just staggering when you consider their size. Despite being physically tiny, Singapore allocates around 3% of its GDP to defense.
3% is huge for a country like that.
It translates to something like 17 to 18 billion US dollars annually. That level of spending puts them among the top 30 global defense spenders. It's a wildly disproportionate investment that sends a very clear signal. We're absolutely serious about this.
And like Israel, their fortress is built on deep manpower integration. compulsory national service for all men 2 years.
2 years, okay.
And then they remain active reservists, training regularly well into their 40s. This policy creates this ready force of about 250,000 trained fighters, all capable of very rapid mobilization into what's a highly digitized, networked defensive force. Their military philosophy sounds laser-focused, modernity over mass, quality over quantity. Totally. They prioritize a relatively small but overwhelmingly advanced military force designed for surgical, high-speed, high-impact strikes. We're talking state-of-the-art platforms. F-15s, F-16s, they're getting F-35 soon. Highly advanced stealth frigates for their Navy, modern submarines, top-tier Leopard 2 main battle tanks for the Army.
Top shelf stuff.
Absolutely top shelf. And to maintain that absolute technological edge and ensure their people are trained to the highest possible standards, their specialized forces, especially their pilots, they have to train overseas extensively.
Why overseas?
Simply because Singapore itself is too small. They don't have the landmass or the airspace to run complex, large-scale training exercises safely or realistically. So they effectively leverage training facilities around the world in the US, Australia, France to maintain this qualitative edge that very few nations, regardless of their size, can actually match.
And all this quality, this high-tech edge, it drives their preemptive defense doctrine,
Yeah.
which sounds like it's all about speed and hitting first.
Speed and decisiveness are paramount. Their goal, if conflict seems imminent, is potentially to strike first, achieve air superiority literally within minutes, use these digitized rapid mobilization techniques to get reserves into position almost instantly,
Wow.
and deploy special forces immediately against any kind of infiltration or early attack. Their entire defense posture is geared to be surgically fast and overwhelmingly painful right at the point of contact. Make the cost immediate and severe.
And critically, again, like Israel perhaps, civil defense is completely woven into daily life. It has to be, given their vulnerability.
You see it everywhere. Specific examples of infrastructure preparedness are baked in. Subway stations are designed to double as hardened bomb shelters.
Right. I've heard that.
Many high-rise buildings, especially newer ones, are mandated to include dedicated shelter areas. And routine emergency drills for terrorism, air raids, etc. are standard procedure for the population. They operate with this collective, continuous awareness that, yes, they are small and they could be a target.
So, analyzing this poisonous shrimp model, it really is pure deterrence by punishment, isn't it? But achieved not through mass, like North Korea, but through extreme quality and speed.
Exactly. An aggressor might technically be able to take the island, but the cost calculation is prohibitive. They'd gain a tiny resource-poor piece of territory, but only after facing immediate high-tech and truly catastrophic losses against a force that is disproportionately well-trained, well-equipped, and ready to inflict maximum pain very, very quickly. The cost-to-gain ratio is just made completely unacceptable.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, wrapping it up. We've looked at 5 profoundly distinct models. It proves that a fortress can look radically different depending on, well, everything. Resources, geography, history, strategic goals.
Yeah, and we can synthesize those core strategies now and really see the philosophical divides at play.
Let's do that.
Okay, so Israel, that's layered defense and constant vigilance. It's deterrence by denial, primarily, achieved through technological supremacy and that deep mandatory societal integration.
Got it.
North Korea, that's deterrence through guaranteed devastation.
Yeah.
Pure deterrence by punishment, driven by sheer mass, using geography for protection and leveraging brutality, essentially.
Right.
Switzerland, engineering peace by preparing for siege. That's a strategy of strategic isolation, using infrastructure deterrence the redoubt, the shelters designed to make occupation logistically impossible or just not worth the effort. Neutrality through strength.
Makes sense.
United States. Unmatched superpower status protected by geography. Its fortress is defined by scale, distance, and that global force projection capability. Deterrence by denial on a planetary scale.
Okay.
And finally, Singapore. The small but deadly model. The poisonous shrimp. That's deterrence by punishment again, but achieved through extreme quality, speed, and making the immediate costs utterly prohibitive for any attacker.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? I think the crucial takeaway here is that national defense, real national survival, it transcends just looking at budget lines or counting tanks and planes. It's fundamentally about how entire societies organize themselves legally, culturally, economically, even architecturally around this perceived necessity of survival. These 5 nations facing completely different threats, possessing radically different resources, they've all achieved in their own way the same strategic goal. making the very idea of invading them seem almost suicidal for the attacker.
Yeah, and that raises, I think, a really important final question for you to maybe mull over after this. If all these nations, from the biggest superpower to the tiniest city-state, are pouring such massive resources, such deep societal commitment into trying to achieve this state of impenetrability, is complete national defense a true fortress, even possible in our hyper-interconnected 21st century? Or does global trade reliance, digital interconnection, dependence on complex global supply chains, does all that actually make the very concept of a truly sealed-off fortress nation an unavoidable illusion these days?
That is a provocative thought to end on. Thank you for diving deep with us today on these fortress nations. Whether you come away thinking geography is destiny, or technology is salvation, or maybe it's societal will, we hope this deep dive helps you understand the true, often staggering cost of survival in the modern world.